Have you ever been in a flow state? Like everything was just working. Doors were opening. The right people were showing up at exactly the right moment. And then something small happened. A bad comment. A bill you weren't expecting. A voice in your head that said, "This is too good to be true." And just like that, it collapsed. All of it. Gone. What if that wasn't bad luck? What if that collapse had a precise mechanical explanation? One that a civilization figured out 12,000 years ago. One that got buried, passed through secret schools, carried across continents, and then demonstrated publicly in one of the most witnessed moments in all of recorded history. Because here's what I want to show you today. There are two completely different types of intention operating in your life right now. And the one you're probably relying on, the one modern society tells you to rely on, is the weaker one, by a long shot. So let's get into it. My name is Daniel Moreno, and I have been obsessing over this particular thread for a long time. And I mean that literally. I remember sitting in my home office about 3 years ago. It was late, probably 1 a.m., and I was going down this rabbit hole on pre-Diluvian civilizations, and I hit something that genuinely stopped me cold. Because when you actually look at the archaeological record, not the textbook version, the actual digs, the actual structures, you find something that history is not supposed to allow. The further back you go, the more precise the engineering gets. That's backwards, right? That is the literal opposite of how civilization is supposed to progress. We're talking about structures that are more mathematically exact than what modern construction can produce. We're talking about accounts of consciousness mastery that current neuroscience is only now beginning to study. And we're talking about a time that predates every written language we currently know of. 12,000 years ago. Before the pyramids, before the Vedic texts, before anything our history books recognize as advanced. Now, 360 BC, Plato, the most celebrated philosopher in the Western tradition, sits down and writes about a direct transmission, a record passed through his ancestor Solon by an Egyptian high priest who told him that the Egyptian temples had been holding this knowledge for thousands of years, waiting for someone ready to receive it. And what that record described was a civilization so spiritually sophisticated that they had fully mastered something every mystic tradition after them spent centuries trying to reconstruct: the ability to move reality through consciousness alone. And here's the part nobody talks about: that civilization fell. Not because of an external enemy, not because of a natural disaster, at least not primarily. It collapsed because of its own ego, its own self-importance. A small group of keepers escaped. The structures were destroyed, but the core knowledge, the actual mechanism, survived. It seeded the Egyptian mystery schools. It traveled into the Vedic traditions. It moved through the Essenes. And then, one teacher demonstrated it so completely, so undeniably, in front of so many witnesses, that 8 billion people are still wrestling with what they saw. A man walks across water. His student steps out of the boat, and for a moment, it works. And then, the rational mind kicks in. The student looks down, starts calculating, starts doubting, and he sinks. And the teacher reaches down and says 4 words. Why did you doubt? That was the whole teaching. That 4-word question was the entire 12,000-year lineage compressed into one sentence. Because what that student lost in that moment wasn't religious faith. It was something far more specific, far more mechanical. It was what the source material from that ancient tradition actually called outer intention. And that's what I want to unpack for you today. Okay, so let's actually break this down, because I think most people, and I was absolutely one of these people, are operating from only one of these two modes and don't even know the other one exists. There are 3 paradigms of existence that show up across basically every wisdom tradition. The first is the having paradigm. This is where most people live, focused entirely on the outcome, on what they can get, on what they want to possess. And the painful irony is that the more intensely you focus on having something, the more you are broadcasting to the field of reality that you don't already have it. You're setting your frequency to lack. And reality, being the mirror that it is, reflects that signal back at you, more lack, right? The second paradigm is the doing paradigm. This is where a lot of driven, ambitious, action-oriented people live. And look, this paradigm gets results. I'm not dismissing it. If you use inner intention, your personal willpower, your focused effort, your left brain strategic execution, you will manifest a lot of what you want. I have. But here's the ceiling. Inner intention is limited. It's you trying to reposition yourself relative to every possible version of reality by sheer force. You're pushing, you're fighting, you're grinding against the mirror instead of changing the image. And that brings me to the third paradigm, the being paradigm. And this is where outer intention lives. So here's the distinction, and I want to say this clearly because it took me an embarrassingly long time to actually understand it. Inner intention says, I will go out and make this happen. Outer intention says, somehow, it just happens. And I know, that sounds like I'm asking you to believe in magic. But stay with me, because there's a mechanism here. Outer intention is the focus of your attention on how a goal gets realized of its own accord, not how you force it, how it unfolds. It's the difference between trying to manually move every water molecule in a river versus learning to read the current. The river is already going somewhere. Outer intention is how you stop fighting the river and start moving with the field that's already in motion. Now think about someone in your life who just seems lucky. Like things just work out for them. Opportunities show up. The right doors open at the right time. You've probably looked at that person and thought, what are they doing that I'm not? And the answer usually isn't that they're working harder. In a lot of cases, they're working less hard. What they've done, consciously or not, is figured out how to stop interrupting the flow with their rational mind. I'll give you a concrete way to feel this. Right now, I want you to think about moving your hand. Think, I am going to move my hand. I will now move my hand. Notice the heaviness of that? Now just move your hand. No announcement, no narration, just intention into action. That gap between the thought and the act, that's where doubt lives. That's where the student sank. Outer intention collapses that gap. The action simply arises from the choice. No interference from the calculating mind. And I personally think this is the most underrated distinction in all of personal development. More than mindset, more than habits, more than morning routines. Because once you see it, you realize most self-help is just helping you run inner intention more efficiently. It's optimizing the fighting. It never addresses the deeper level where the actual leverage is. Now here's the piece about ego that most people miss. The Atlantean civilization, the one Plato described, didn't fall because their knowledge was wrong. It fell because they got too attached to being the ones who wielded it. They got self-important. And when thought energy becomes too concentrated around the self, around the ego's need to be the source of outcomes, something in the field corrects it. Balancing forces come in. You've seen this in people, right? The person who gets wildly successful and then implodes. The business that dominates and then collapses from within. The overcorrection is real. It's not metaphor. Outer intention only flows cleanly when the ego gets out of the way. When the artist credits the work, not themselves. When the entrepreneur says, somehow this came together, instead of, I built this. That's not false humility. That's the actual mechanics of how this works. So here's the practical side. Because I am not interested in giving you a beautiful philosophical framework that you walk away from and never actually use. I've been in enough rooms where that happened. You get inspired, you feel the shift, you go home, and 3 days later, you're back in the same loop. That's inner intention dressed up as awakening. I don't want that for you. Outer intention is a muscle, and like any muscle, it has atrophied through lack of use. Most of us can wiggle our fingers, right? Easy. We can move our limbs. A little harder to wiggle your ears. Some of you can, most can't. Try wiggling your liver right now. Go ahead. I'll wait. Yeah, exactly. Outer intention is even further along that spectrum. It's a capacity we have. It's genuinely ours, but we've stopped using it so long ago that reconnecting to it requires actual deliberate practice. So let me give you the first and most important move. Stop fighting what is and start choosing what comes next. Those are two completely different orientations. Fighting what is. I don't like this situation. I need to change it. I need to push it away. That is inner intention. That is you trying to shatter the mirror because you don't like the reflection. Choosing what comes next is outer intention. You shift the image. You don't wrestle with the reflection. So the next time you're in a situation that feels stuck, a legal problem, a financial pressure, a relationship tension, try this. Instead of asking, how do I fix this? Ask yourself, what do I choose to be true in the next moment? And then hold that. Not desperately, not with white-knuckle focus. Just choose it. Like you chose to move your hand earlier. Clean, simple, no interference. The second move is this: live in uncertainty on purpose. I know that's uncomfortable. I know every instinct you have is screaming for security, for a plan, for some guarantee before you take the leap. But here's what I've found, and I mean this from actual experience, not theory. A few years back, I was sitting on an idea for a completely new direction in my work, something that made zero logical sense to anyone around me, including people I respected. And I spent months waiting for certainty that never came. The logical mind kept saying, not yet, not enough information, what if it doesn't work? And then one day, I just moved. No announcement, no guarantee, just chose it and moved. And the pieces arranged themselves in ways I could not have engineered. I'm not saying it was easy, I'm saying it was undeniable. That's outer intention. You take the leap and then your mind catches up afterwards, not before. The mind cannot lead here. It's too limited. It can only rationalize what already happened. The heart knows, but it can't articulate. And because it can't articulate, the logical mind dismisses it. So you have to learn to move from the heart's knowing before the mind gives its permission. That's the practice. Now here's the thing about the distinction between inner and outer intention that I really want to land. Inner intention says, I did this. Outer intention says, it happened through me. And this is not just philosophical poetry. It has a direct, practical effect on results. The most consistently successful people I have studied and spoken to personally do not take credit for their best work. The great artists say the work came through them. The great athletes describe being in the zone, where they weren't thinking, they were just happening. That is outer intention. And the moment they start thinking about how great they are, the moment the ego steps in front of the current, the zone disappears. So the practice is this: when you catch yourself fighting, switch to choosing. When you catch yourself waiting for certainty, take the leap. When you catch yourself saying, I made this happen, try saying, this happened. Not because you're weak, because you're tapping into a current that is vastly more powerful than anything your individual willpower can generate alone. Look, one of the comments I got recently on another video actually put it perfectly. Someone wrote, keeping mankind in fear is how they protect their wealth and secrets. And that commenter was onto something real, because the entire architecture of mass culture pushes you toward inner intention, toward the having paradigm, toward grinding, toward consuming, toward securing. It keeps you focused on the reflection in the mirror rather than on the image you're projecting. It keeps the muscle of outer intention permanently atrophied. That's not accidental. A population that knows how to use outer intention is a population that cannot be controlled by manufactured scarcity. 12,000 years ago, a civilization knew this and used it fully. The knowledge survived because a few keepers refused to let it die. It's in the Egyptian schools, in the Vedic texts, in the Essene traditions, and it was demonstrated in the most public and undeniable way possible by someone who said, essentially, doubt is the only thing that can stop you. Not the water, doubt. You have both kinds of intention available to you right now. The question is, which one you're training. Start noticing where you're fighting versus where you're choosing. That awareness alone will begin to shift the frequency you're broadcasting, and therefore, the reality that reflects it back. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.